Hello, welcome to Tennessee's Lesson at Home Learning series for literacy. Today's lesson is for all of our 8th graders, although anyone is welcome to tune in. This is the 4th in this week's series. My name is Mr. Ayers, and I am an 8th grade ELA teacher in Tennessee schools. I am so excited to be your teacher for this lesson. Welcome to my virtual classroom. If you didn't see our previous lessons, you can find them at www.tn.gov/education. You can still tune in to today's lesson if you haven't seen any of our others, but it might be more fun if you go back and watch our other lessons, since today we'll be talking about things we've learned previously. Today we will continue reading a short story called The Gift of the Magi. Yesterday, we learned about Della's effort to find the perfect Christmas gift for Jim. We learned that she searched many stores before she found the perfect gift, a platinum fob chain. This chain was simple and beautiful, and Della thought it was not only perfect for Jim and his personality, but that would go perfectly with his watch, one of his greatest prized possessions. We also learned how she went home and fixed her freshly cut hair to look as nice as possible. She is really nervous about how he will react to her not having her long hair anymore. So, to prepare for him coming home, she made coffee, prepared dinner, and she waits nervously. We left you hanging yesterday, but you'll find out today how he reacts. Before we get started, to participate fully in our lesson today, you will need paper, pencil, and a surface to write on. If you can get the student packet for ELA Grade 8 Lesson 19, that's great. If you can't print it, don't worry about it. You can always just use your notebook paper and write your notes there. All right, let's begin. Today, our goal is to continue reading The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry so that we can analyze the text in order to predict how it will end. The author, O. Henry, is known for his amazing and often surprising endings. Just as a reminder, this is a longer text, so I had to cut out a few portions of it so we can be sure to finish it. But don't worry, you still have everything you need to be able to understand the story. We will begin today with me reading portions of the text, and then we will reread it and pause along the way to take notes and discuss the text for deeper understanding. At the end of the lesson, I will assign you independent work you can complete after the video ends. Let's briefly revisit independent work from yesterday that you completed. You explained the ways the author helped us to understand Della's character. You used specific details from the lesson, and you used important vocabulary words that you learned from yesterday. For independent practice yesterday, the prompt was, explain the ways the author helps us to understand Della's character. Be sure to include details from the story today, as well as those details revealed about Della's characters. Please use 3 of the vocabulary words that you learned today in your summary. So I'm going to show you what I came up with. I wrote and included details from the story yesterday that reveals Della's character. I also will use the 3 vocabulary words. So follow along as I read. There are a number of interesting ways in which the author O. Henry reveals to his readers that Della loves her husband greatly and that she is willing to sacrifice time, money, and effort to make him happy. In the section that we read today, the author focused mainly on Della's character and revealed it through a number of key details. One way that he did it was through the use of figurative language. He said that Della turned all the stores inside out. This is a clear way of showing readers that Della was willing to go through all the stores and search every item to find the perfect Christmas gift for Jim. The author also used detailed descriptions to explain how Della found the perfect gift. He talks about the gift being simple and chaste in design, and that it showed its value by substance alone. He said that it represented Jim in that it possessed quietness and value. This all reveals Della's character because she valued these qualities in the key fob much like she valued these qualities in Jim's character. Finally, the author uses good description and sensory language to show Della's genuine love for Jim. He describes Della as having to break out of her spell of excitement and use prudence and reason in preparing for Jim's arrival. This begins with her fixing her hair, despite the ravages that resulted from cutting her long hair. Della was determined to make Jim happy. At the end of the section, the author uses sensory language to show Della's anxious anticipation of his arrival. The author says that she heard his steps on the stair away down on the first flight, and that she turned white for a moment while whispering a silent prayer. This language brings this scene to life for the reader and helps them to experience Della's anxiety. All the while, though, the reader understands that this is another example of Della's deep love for Jim. In each of these ways, the author develops a clear picture of Della's character and prepares the reader for the final scenes of the story. So let's review a few details I included in my description and see if you included them in yours. The author uses figurative language to show that Della is very persistent and dedicated to finding the perfect Christmas gift for Jim. Della finally finds the perfect gift through detailed description. The author shows that Della values this gift for its simple beauty and feels like this gift is the perfect gift for Jim, and she sees him the same way. The author uses good description and sensory language to show that as she arrives home, she contains her excitement and focuses on doing things that will make Jim happy. She fixes her freshly cut hair, she makes coffee, and prepares to cook dinner. This shows her genuine love for Jim as she wants to make him happy. Did you have those details in your description? I have also included 3 sentences with vocabulary words. I wrote, he describes Della as having a breakout of her spell of excitement and used prudence and reason in preparing for Jim's arrival. Here's my second sentence. Despite the ravages that resulted from cutting her long hair, Della was determined to make Jim happy. And my third sentence, the author used sensory detail to show that although Della had thoroughly prepared for Jim's arrival, she was still very anxious to see his reaction to her hair. Were you able to include a few sentences in your description using vocabulary words from yesterday? We will be encountering new words today, so be sure to take notes on them as we go so you can use them in your independent practice. Okay, let's continue the short story we've been studying. As a reminder, although the plot is fairly easy to understand, the author tells this simple story in a complex way, and he allows us to have multiple layers of meaning. So we'll only read a couple of sentences at a time, and then we'll dig into the puzzle of those sentences and see what the words mean and what the author is talking about. To help us do this, we will use the graphic organizer we've used in the previous lessons to track our notes. You can see that we have certain sections on the organizer that are labeled various people or things, characters, key ideas, plot, vocabulary, and literary devices. which are tools like metaphors and images the author uses to convey meaning. And themes are important messages. This will be important, and we will use this as a tool through the text, and we will keep adding to it. Take a moment to make sure you have your graphic organizer from your previous lesson, or to make yourself a new one if you don't. As we read and discuss each of these elements of the text, we will pause and give you time to write your notes onto your graphic organizer. We will actually be using this organizer for the next lesson as well, so please keep it handy. Okay, now remember we have learned that Della and Jim lived in a furnished flat. That is, they rent an apartment with furniture supplied in it. It is not a very nice apartment though, and they rent it for pretty cheap. Della has been working for months to save money, and all that she has to show for it is $1.87. It's Christmas Eve, and she does not have enough money to buy the gift for Jim that she wants to buy for him. Della decides to sell her hair in order to buy Jim a nice gift. Della searches through all the stores to find the perfect Christmas gift for Jim. She finally finds it, a platinum fob chain, which will pair perfectly with his watch. Della goes home, fixes her hair, and prepares for Jim's arrival. Okay, let's jump back into the text. Let's see how things work out for them. The door opened, and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22, and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. As I read this paragraph again, let's list in your notes all the descriptive words the author chose to use. The door opened and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22, and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. So I wrote in my notes, thin, serious, poor, only 22, burdened, needs new overcoat, has no gloves. The imagery here really paints a depressing picture and certainly reveals a miserable mood. Remember, it is Christmas Eve, and some households this would be a joyous occasion. Let's keep reading. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of a quail. What do you think that can mean? Let's explore it. First, I noticed the phrase, a setter at the scent of a quail, is a simile. Remember, this text is full of metaphors and similes, comparisons that help the story come to life. The author uses them frequently. Also, a setter is a type of dog. Setters are dogs used in bird hunting, and a quail is a type of bird that is hunted. When the setter finds a quail, it stands still like you see in the picture here. This simile provides imagery that helps us picture Jim standing as still as a statue in the doorway of the apartment. What kind of mood do you think Jim is in? It seems like he's pretty serious, doesn't it? Imagine if instead he had burst into the apartment singing, whistling, and smiling. That would be quite the opposite mood the author has set. Let's keep going. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly, with that peculiar expression on his face. Okay, we know from our previous readings that Jim and Della really love and know each other well. I think it would be safe to infer that Della can tell that Jim really isn't feeling angry, surprised, disapproving, or horrified. But how does he feel? I think Della is terrified because she doesn't understand how Jim's feeling. She is also probably anxious and worried about Jim's reaction to her new haircut. After all, they were both so proud of her hair. Let's keep reading. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. Jim, darling, she cried, don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows really fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you. So now we watch as Della tries to persuade and convince Jim to feel happy and excited. This really goes along with what we know about the relationship already. She says, let's be happy. What a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you. She is still devoted and persistent. Do you think Jim will like his gift? Let's see. You've cut off your hair, asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor. How did Jim ask that question? Laboriously? Based on the tone, mood, and context, what do you think that word would mean? It looks like it has the word labor in it, which you probably know means work. Laboriously means in a way that takes considerable time, effort, and work. Let's be sure to jot that word down along with its meaning in the vocabulary section in the graphic organizer. Another potentially new word is patent. Let's note this one on the graphic organizer as well. Patent in this case means obvious. So Jim asks, you've cut off your hair? Slowly and with some difficulty, as if it was hard work to ask the question, like it is making his brain hurt, or if he doesn't understand, even though it is really obvious Della has in fact cut off her hair. Do you think he could be in shock? Let's see. Cut it off and sold it, said Della. Don't you like me just as well anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I? Jim looked about the room curiously. So Della has come right out to say it. It sounds like she is hopeful that Jim still loves her. Do you think he does? Let's read on. You say your hair is goner, he said, with an air almost of idiocy. Well, Jim certainly seems still in a state of shock and disbelief. With an air of almost idiocy, pretty clearly lets the reader know that Jim is confused or some might say stupefied. You needn't look for it, said Della. It's sold. I tell you, sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered, she went on with sudden serious sweetness, but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim? So here, Della continues to almost beg Jim to understand what she has done and to feel happy. And then she begins talking about the pork chop dinner. Do you think she is trying to get Jim to snap out of it? Out of his trance, Jim seems quickly to wake. Finally, he enfolded his Della. To enfold means to hug. Be sure to jot this down in the vocabulary section. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. Okay, let's break this sentence down a bit and interpret it. First, let's make sure we know the meaning of the words the author chooses to use. Be sure to list words and their meaning in the vocabulary section. Not only will understanding the words help you understand the reading and complete your independent practice, but you are sure to encounter these words in situations other than this story. And now you'll have a deeper understanding of them. Discreet, in this case, means subtle or unnoticeable. Scrutiny is critical observation or examination, looking carefully and carefully at something. Inconsequential, unimportant, or meaningless. Now that you've jotted down the vocabulary, Let's read the sentence again to try to understand it a little better. Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. So it seems like Jim and Della are hugging, and the author invites the audience to study some meaningless object subtly. The couple is hugging, and the author wants us to look away, maybe to give them some private moment. Let's read it again to see if you pick that up. Out of his trance, Jim seems quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard some with discreet scrutiny, some inconsequential object in the other direction. Let's look in the other direction. I've noticed the author seems to talk directly to the audience frequently. Like in this paragraph, instead of continuing to tell the story, he says, let us regard, urging the reader to look away. This is a literary device called direct address. Authors use this technique to help the reader feel as if they are included in the story. Do you feel included in the story? Do you remember other instances in the text where the author addresses the audience directly? If you saw our first lesson about this story, you might remember that the author told us he was going to show us around the apartment a bit while Della finished crying. That was another example of direct address. Let's add this technique to the graphic organizer under literary devices. Direct address is when the author talks directly to the audience. Okay, let's read that part one more time. Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. What a cool technique. Let's keep reading. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. I'll bet it's my Christmas gift. For Della, what do you think? Don't make any mistake, Dell, he said, about me. I don't think there is anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that can make me like my girl any less. He does still love her. I'll bet Della is relieved. I wonder why Jim has been acting so strangely, though. Let's keep reading. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first. So Jim is going to reveal why he was acting so oddly. But that will have to wait until tomorrow for us to find out. We'll leave it at this cliffhanger. Be sure to join us tomorrow to see what happens next. Let's add a few notes to our graphic organizer to make sure we summarize what we read today. In the plot section of the graphic organizer, summarize what happened in today's reading. I wrote, Jim comes home and is shocked to discover that Della has cut her hair. Della is worried that Jim will be upset, but in the end, he still loves her. Jim brings home a gift for Della. Okay, before we close for today, let's review our notes for our graphic organizer. As I read what I have in my notes, please add anything that you don't already have in yours. I added to the plot, vocabulary, and literary device sections of the graphic organizer today. The characters continue to exhibit characteristics that we've already noted, such as how much they love and care for each other. For the plot, we summarize that Jim comes home and is shocked to discover that Della has cut her hair. Della is worried that Jim will be upset, but his actions and words indicate he still loves her. Jim brings home a gift for Della. We did encounter quite a bit of new vocabulary words today. Let's make sure we got them all. Laboriously means in a way that takes considerable time, effort, and work. Patent means obvious. Enfold is to hug. Discreet means subtle or unnoticeable. Scrutiny is critical observation or examination, looking closely and carefully at something. Inconsequential means unimportant or meaningless. And we also added a new literary device. A direct address is when an author speaks directly to the readers. Okay, these notes will help you complete the independent assignment. I look forward to reading what happens next, and I'm sure you are curious as well. For your independent work today, please respond to this prompt. Based on the plot and character development, what do you think will happen next in O. Henry's short story, The Gift of the Magi? Write a narrative in which you create a possible ending for the story. Be sure to use the literary devices that O. Henry uses, and keep in mind that you already know about the characters. Thank you so much. I have really enjoyed reading the short story, The Gift of the Magi, with you today. Thank you for inviting me into your home. I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson in Tennessee's At Home Learning Series. Goodbye.